Hi.
Hi, how are
How's
you?
your Oh, I'm good. It's very Friday. How's your afternoon going?
It's good, actually. It's amazing. We are kind of mid-December and still looking for folks to support our hamper program. And so all day today, every time someone supports the hamper program, we're like, yay! So it's a good day, right? Like it's a good day when we're seeing support coming in. So yeah,
Well, we're getting close to the finish line for that one. And then
yeah.
there's all of the other stuff that we do. Um, and it's been an interesting year. So we had chatted beforehand and we just wanted to have a little bit of a talk, slightly more casual than our usual constructed videos, and just sort of go over some of the more interesting points of the year and talk about how that leads into the new year. uh, which is sort of what everybody's doing this time of mid to late December, depending on when people are watching this.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been a heck of a year, and I'm sort of interested in what your feelings are on how has this year been different from last year? Because last year everything was surprising, everything was different. Nobody had any idea what they were doing with the global situation, and now it's year two, so that should mean we've learned some things, but we're still trying to experiment and adapt to changing circumstances.
Yeah. So it's funny, and because when you first said like what was this last year, like I was like, when did this year start? Like that was my first, like that's where my brain went first. Like I couldn't remember where it started because with the pandemic it's been this ongoing shift here, do this, and so like literally in January what we were doing, of course, was we were trying to make sure we raised enough money for this year now endings programs. And what happened was we had set a goal for 125,000, and then somewhere in like February, I think it was, we got to 125,000, and then we were like, oh, but our year end doesn't end till like March 31st. So we were like, well, maybe we should do a stretch goal, because of course all the money that we raised just goes into programming. And so we made the stretch goal, and then we made it, which was incredible for us as an organization, because we just didn't know, if we could get that much support. And then to see that support come in just like blew us away and really started us on a year on such a positive note, right? So it's kind of funny because there's like a fiscal year end, and then there's like a year end that we're living in life, right? Like December 31st
Right.
onto January. So January, people, I know myself, approach as like, yeah, it's a new year, a new start, fresh. And that first 3 months of like actually getting to that goal was so powered us up, right? For the rest of the year. And including, like, we had a donor who's my uncle, who's an artist, who was gave us this stack of beautiful pictures that he had done through some art practice he has that we gave out, which was lovely to share with donors. Because for us, we were kind of thinking about, we think about our work, I think, as like having a lot to do with what matters in life, right? About dignity. So although we are trying to create job opportunities, those job opportunities are really like a pathway or an opening to dignity and living a good life. And so it was so cool to see people respond to his photos and why we were doing it. And I think it just started off the year incredible.
Well, it was definitely an opportunity for one of our supporters who's been around for a while to do something a little bit different. And that feels like it's been the theme of the whole last 2 years is life has to continue, but we have to do it a little bit differently this time. Um, and one of the things that we did that was brand new. So our normal programs, most of them continued just sort of as they were, grants and support for partner organizations. There have been some modifications along the way. Um, but we had to scale down last year on our in-office volunteers, which we'll get to in a little bit. But we also scaled up on some other things and some new practices, particularly last year's Powering Up program, which has
Mhm.
become this very interesting example of It wasn't even a really big model change for us,
Yeah,
but the impact that it had and the feedback that we've gotten from our partners was certainly positive.
incredible actually. Yeah, so powering up was we accessed the federal government's funding. It was a community emergency fund. I have the words wrong, and it was facilitated by the Winnipeg Foundation. And this fiscal year, they granted us $58,000. This was a straight through grant that we gave out to, I think in the end, it was like 12 or 13 organizations were involved. Some who received what would be, the LITE kind of standard grant size, around $5,000 to engage people over many weeks.
Mhm.
But it also contains a fund that we created where an organization could send us an email. There was like a one-page application that you could fill out in like 5 minutes, and what we asked them for is like, tell us like what you want to do, and have someone kind of ready for a job. So by what you wanted someone to do was like, oh, you had a fence that you wanted someone to paint, or you had sandwiches at this event that you wanted someone to make. And the fund, we called these the Springboard Job Fund, would say great. And as long as they qualify, right, they're a charity and it's like a very low income person who would be paid to be engaged and serve their community. We were like, great. And so would get the application in, and then we would send the money, and then we would ask them to get the person who did the job, and many of them were 1 or 2 days long, to fill out a survey when they got paid, so that we could get feedback on, like, does this make a difference? Did this matter in this person's life? And that fund, in the end, I think there was like well over 100 to 150. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but we're going to be doing some, I think some programming with our partners in the spring around the results, because they're incredible. But of the people that access that kind of job, the springboard jobs, I mean, the results were just like kind of overwhelming in the sense that they all indicated that the thing that mattered most to people about that job was that it was a safe way to earn money. Now, this is something that we've heard from participants in all kinds of LITE funded jobs before, including the ones that are, more programmatic. And by that, I mean happen over multiple weeks and are really about getting people to the next step, which we call moving up jobs. But the there was a starkness in the way to like how much that safe way to earn money mattered to that particular group of people accessing those particular kinds of jobs, that we were pretty blown away by it. I remember a day in June, I think it was, and this is when we were getting these surveys back from our partners, that I was kind of like just looking through this data, and like I basically like got really choked up because it's one thing for like us to go out, and we do this, right? We go out and we'll sit down with someone who's gone through some kind of LITE funded job, and we'll just talk to them about like their life and like why this job mattered. And but to see that many of them and the data being so stark on that point was just like heart-wrenching, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I recall going through this because we spent a lot of time crunching these numbers. It was a new experience for us to have such a clear response. We do get a lot of anecdotal feedback, and
Mhm.
historically that's been sort of what we've had to rely on. Is you talk to a lot of people that are impacted by these jobs, and you talk to the people that they work with at our partner organizations, and we do hear, oh, I was saving up for damage deposits so that I can move out and get into a safer position, or we needed groceries, we needed housing costs, the furnace broke and we got to pay for it now. And, that kind of stuff does add up over time. But to have, I've brought up the numbers actually, because I have this spreadsheet still, I love those. And it's in the job opportunities, the total job opportunities that this program created was 296 across 12
Wow.
partners.
Wow.
So it's over half of our partner network benefited from this.
Yeah.
And 65% of the participants responded that they just needed a safe place to earn money, specifically a safe place to earn money, not what the money was for. That's, we did ask them for multiple responses. So if it was a safe way to get money for housing costs, then that's one thing. We haven't done those comparisons, but 65% of people just needed something safe to do that would be a positive in their
And
life.
it makes total sense in the broader picture of things, as there's been all kinds of stories about rising costs, inflation around food, around housing, and both wages and social assistance being very flat, right? And being already having a gap. We already know that it is possible to be working even full time and not being able to afford a place to live. So of course, the people in our community who are the most low income or no income are even finding that they can't sort of pull it together to find enough to get by every day. And so what that would result in, right, is people will go and people will do things that they don't want to necessarily do to make up that gap. If it means taking care of their little brother, if it means ensuring their kids don't get taken away, there's just what people will do to keep their family safe or their family members safe. It doesn't take much of an imagination, right? And so so I think that's part of what's happening. And this is, just so people who are watching this, to be clear, I think the year before was when we first experimented a little bit with this kind of very short job. For most of LITE's history, all of the jobs we created were through larger grants, those multiple week grants. And we just kept seeing some need, right? Just more people just desperate for cash. And so we had done some experimentation the year previous around that model, where it's and the model's limited, right? Because it's trying to solve an immediate problem right now, $30. It means you can go get groceries. You don't have to spend your day, going to the different hamper programs. And that means you are maybe well rested, so you can take care of your family in a better way. So that's what we started seeing a couple years ago. We did a few experiments. And even with the surveys, this was the first time we did such a huge batch of surveys. But the previous year, we were able to do a smaller set to kind of test to test a bunch of things about what it means to do individual surveys, right? And make sure that the surveys could both fit the participants and the organizations, because across all the organizations LITE works with, there is incredible variety, right? In terms of some programs are really volunteer programs, and where LITE's funding comes into play is to give people sort of an honorarium reward, because the fact is they are engaging people who are on very low income, no income, and that's a way to really allow people to volunteer while not suffering as a result of just not having enough to feed themselves or treat themselves or something. So we had done the year before some testing of different ways to do to sort of have surveys that could fit this wide variety of jobs that LITE creates, that would still be able to give us feedback about why those jobs matter from the participant's perspective, and also be able to give some of our organizations feedback from them as well. Because of course, like, we are a partner-based organization. And so, and I say this to almost every partner all the time, like, we're nothing without these partners that we work with, right?
Absolutely.
So,
And
so we're
it's,
super excited. One more point I want to make here, because
oh, for
I'm like
sure.
super excited in the spring, probably like February, March, to be able to go back to our partners and present them with this data that we collected. Because we have, we have some sort of maps to show them. We have some feedback from their participants to show them that has nothing to do with LITE, but has everything to do with them. And then we also have some feedback that I'm creating this map that links the kind of work people did with, like, what are the jobs that are available, like, in Winnipeg. Like, so is there a match, and how can the skills that people are learning through serving their community be really thought about in a way that is also connected to make longer term goals?
And that's a really interesting one. I think that'll be a lot of fun to see when it's fully developed, because one of the things that I've noticed in my time here is that we work with a lot of different organizations, and in many cases, those organizations are heavily tailored towards a specific set of needs or a specific kind of circumstance that a person may be in. And I've always appreciated that we have that sort of broad coverage, because everybody's circumstances are different, and finding something that will improve their lives, like, you need that diversity of answers to wide-ranging problems. But there are some trends that have been sort of showing up a little bit, and as you said, a lot of these, the programs that we used to work with, and we still do, many of them are the longer standing, train for a job, gain some skills, more structured things. But certainly over the last couple of years, and especially with the pace of change that this year and last year have seen through the pandemic and for other reasons, having that quick response and being a little bit more agile has certainly proved a lot of benefit. And volunteering seems to, this came up earlier and you just brought it up again, so let's get on it.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. I remember when I was a kid in the 80s, volunteering was like the thing that everybody should be doing to prove that they are invested in their community. And now it seems like that's shifted a little bit. It went away for a while and nobody talked about volunteering. And now it's back as a, this isn't just something that you can do for your community. It's often a job that we create for somebody to prove that they have skills, to prove that they're ready to work. And the honorarium system that we have, particularly the springboard jobs, really works well with that, to not just have them benefit the community by making sandwiches or painting a fence, as you said, but to give back. And is that something that I'm just seeing, or is that
I
actually
think it is
a bigger
something you're
deal?
just seeing, but I think that there are some subtle things that we can tease apart from what you're seeing or not seeing.
Mm-hmm.
In that, let me see if I can kind of tease a few things out there. So, I think actually volunteerism has always been a part of LITE. It's something that we probably just don't focus on, because we are trying to focus on the employment, economic development side, like, purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, none of our work actually can even happen without volunteers, from board members to the folks who are in our office right now, helping with some admin work, and I want to talk about them. But I think that when we're talking about supporting volunteerism through the work we do, in some ways, I think there's a mindset that means people from outside the community coming to the community to help. And there are a ton of incredible volunteer-led associations and organizations that are, very much grew out of Winnipeg's North End and West End. The Bear Clan, the Mama Bear Clan would just be just two of them. There are other ones as well. But and those organizations, I should say, have people who are volunteering from the community and people who are coming in from outside the community to support the community. But I think like many of those also, now let me see if I kind of lost my thought, but I want to get back to it because it's important. We have to, when we're talking about supporting volunteerism through, say, a grant that would provide some honorariums, whether it be occasional or almost like an emergency response, if someone is losing their house, but they're an ongoing volunteer, how can we come in and say, you know what, we want to make sure you remain connected to this incredible program, because we know that your future, both your personal future and the future for your community, is so served by you being here, which is what these grants allow. And the difference there is that the grants, in terms of the wages or honorariums, are supporting volunteers who are specifically from the neighborhood, who are poor. And sometimes I think the general imagination around volunteerism is really the model of people from outside coming in. So like I think that's one of the reasons why sometimes we don't even talk too much about volunteerism. When I've gone out in the community and talked to Winnipeggers, and I'll talk about volunteering, and they assume I want them to come and paint the fence. I'm like, no, I don't want you to paint the fence. I don't want you to make sandwiches, but I would really like your support so that I can get our community serving our community, right? And that takes a little bit of a shift, right?
Well, it's people using the same word for two different purposes, even though they're very connected, they are slightly different. And to use your example from earlier, again, we do have this in-office volunteer program, and it's very much, it's an interesting thing, and it's certainly been challenged with the state of the world in the last couple of years, because we simply couldn't have people come into the office to help us out last year, and this year we've had to structure it for the sake of safety. But it's been great meeting some of those people and hearing, we have a newcomer that came in for a little while that was, I think she was in the legal profession at home and came here and just needed some kind of proof that she had the skills that she said she had. So she came and worked with us and did phone calls and a bunch of office work. And at the end, we were able to say, like, we are the first reference.
Yeah. So let me just like pause for a moment and talk a little bit about this program, because one of the things that's really funny about LITE is we tend, most of our work, of course, like 90% of our work is what we mostly talk about. But then there are like these little things that we do, and I think our in-house volunteer program totally falls in this category that we almost never talk about, but yet has been designed to do exactly, our purpose-based stuff. And basically what we've taken when we took a look at our administrative work, and we said, hey, there's a whole bunch of opportunities here that if we welcomed in volunteers, they could do it. For many people, they're coming and getting like just actual first-time experience. And as you kind of indicated, for other people, they're newcomers and they're just like, I am so skilled, but I do not have a Canadian reference. And so we work with them. Let's work together, right? There are other people that come in who are like from here, from our neighborhoods, and they have a slightly different problem of just having a mostly blank resume. So there's kind of two sort of different kinds of people, but have the same problem. And the problem is that employers like kind of don't look at them. One because everything on their resume is from somewhere else, and one because most of their resume would be blank. And it's a real tragedy because honestly, like both groups are just like, talented, interested, excited to learn, wanting to like even give back as they're kind of also needing support. And so it was actually one of the highlights of this year to be able to open that program up again. So last year, when we did our report back to the community, we always show like the year before and the year that just finished. And so the year before it was like 11, in-house volunteers, and then 0. And so I don't know the number quite where it's going to be this year, but it's probably around 11 to 15. And every single one of those people that came in, they all had slightly different stories, but they really were from these two sort of groups, and really help us, actually be able to accomplish all the stuff that we've been working on. One thing that I'll say that we were able to offer this year that we've never been able to offer before, thanks again to both grants and some donors, is we were able to say to folks, if you are very low income and you would like to receive an honorarium as part of your volunteering with us, as long as you can qualify, we will give you an honorarium. So that was something new and I think overdue. And I'm really hoping that we can raise enough money to be able to do it again.
It'll definitely be good to accomplish those kinds of goals. I think it's really important. And we've set some, I think, for this year. You had mentioned earlier that for 2020, the fiscal year of 2020, we had an initial goal of 125,000, and we managed to eclipse that handily, thanks to some very hard work within the community in the last couple of months. And this year, we've set a goal to raise 150,000, which is a little bit higher. I mean, you got to be ambitious. If you're not shooting for a goal, then I don't have an end to that analogy.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of different kinds of things we want to do with that. And I'm just looking at what the breakdown is. And in that 150,000, we're looking at something like $40,000 in support of more springboard jobs, $75,000 in support of the moving up jobs. This is the training programs and the personal growth and development stuff.
Yeah, the ones that have the longer term impact.
Yeah.
Because they're longer term impact, they actually do cost more. Yeah.
Of course. And $20,000 in support of economic development activities, which includes things like social enterprise and developing new and fancy things with our partners, that our partners can make and sell on the LITE shop. And then, of course, there's a little bit also in support of our operations, which does help with the volunteer program, because if our lights aren't on, there's no opportunity for people to come in and volunteer and do admin work for us. But I think the question I always want to ask with stuff like this is, we sort of know what those outcomes are. We've been doing this for a while now. LITE's been around for close on 25 years, if not longer. But there's always some value in hoping for the best outcome and then even better. So I think my question, the last thing I want to hear your thoughts on is, if we doubled that, what kind of change do you think we'd see in the community? What kind of impact could we make?
Yeah, well, end with an easy one there, Ian. Yeah, if we double that, so like 300,000.
Yeah,
that's what you want me to dream about. I mean, I think it would be. I can't even actually imagine. Like, I think that like 150 is really ambitious, and if we had 300, of course we would be able to fulfill requests, right? Like, there's never actually, we're never actually meeting the request from the community, when we're only raising $150,000. So 300 would be my heart would be full, and I would actually be like, okay, I think that is very good. So I mean, but I don't know if that's just obvious, right? Obviously, I think that I want to kind of look a little bit more, if you don't mind, at that breakdown, because I think that so we talked a little bit about springboard jobs. Those are very kind of temporary, fleeting in a way, but like important in that emergency kind of moment. The moving up jobs we talked about, they have longer term impact. We didn't really talk about both the economic development piece and even operations, right? Which
Right.
like a lot of organizations tend to shy away from. And I'm always really blunt with people, and so let's get that one out of the way. Where I would say, you know what, you cannot not have operational costs. Like, and I know that when we were going into this fiscal year and we were putting a budget together, me and the board, we had a whole bunch of things we didn't know that we would have money for. We didn't know if we would get a grant from the province of Manitoba. We're very fortunate that we did, but we made the decision not to like just slash and burn and lay people off, because we were like, you know what? Our community is really suffering right now, and we need to make sure we have people who are able to respond. And it was only because like I was literally in my seat that I could apply to this emergency funding that was coming from the federal government, and it all went out, right? It all like
Absolutely.
$58,000 out to the community that wouldn't have been there had, and just my seat wasn't there. Maybe it didn't have to be me, it could have been anyone else. And so that was like a real like proof of concept in a sense of like, keep your people, because they're the ones that do the work. And that's how I see what our job is, right? Like our job is to do economic development and find resources for our community. So that kind of leads me to the importance of economic development. Now, economic development is kind of like our volunteer program in that it's something that we don't really talk a lot about, because we really do want to emphasize that like those first job opportunities, because obviously they're just so important in people's like just getting to that next step. And
I
of
think
course, it's
it's
the majority of our work as well.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
What
think
were you
it's
saying?
no, it's the most complicated aspect of the work
It's
that we do, I
complicated too.
think,
It is
because
complicated.
and
To show
and
you something though. I want to
oh,
show
for sure.
something. Yeah, okay. So I want to show you this, right? Like, so it's funny. I need to bring this back. It was here to take a photo. So this, if people have seen this, this is our pancake mix, light and fluffy pancake mix. And then if you purchase this on the back, you'll see like, this is our nutritional information. All this is actually what I would put under economic development, in the sense that we sold it this year. I mean, we sold over 1,000 of these, which for the group that did the actual mixing, because you can't just put the ingredients in a packet and sell it. There's a whole bunch of regulation around it, including telling people like, what's in it, and having someone who's going to say, I'm responsible for putting this in the world. That's why our name is on it. We are responsible for it. But the partner who made it, which was Food Connections, a program of Wolsey Family Place. When I called them up in September, I was like, how are things going? And they were just like, we are dying. They run this fantastic social enterprise that teaches people skills and engages women who have, often multiple young children. So they're very limited in terms of being able to enter sort of part-time or full-time employment, but like could really use the time to like develop some skills, and access other things at the center, including just a break from childcare. So they have a like sort of drop-in daycare there. So many of the women will come work for a couple of hours while their children are being taken care of, and do something like this. So I called her up, and she said, like, we're a catering company that often sells to other programs. Everyone's still shut down. And so I said, well, we were experimenting this summer. We were thinking about, could we do a pancake mix? Because we were pretty sure that our annual pancake breakfast wasn't going to go forward, or we were hemming and hawing anyway. So we had come up with the idea of this pancake mix, which is, one of the ways that we were able to sell or 500 of these. 500, yeah. And but to get back to economic development, so there was like an immediate need for them to look for work, which this provided this whole fall. But when you think about like, you know, this as an asset, right? Like the design, the name, the ingredients, it's
All
a
the testing and the
fantastic.
certification, all of that
Yeah, yeah, all
stuff.
that stuff. And it's also like a fantastic recipe that like we put a bunch of these in some of our hampers as well, because you can just add, we designed it specifically that you could just add water. So there's a lot of thought that went into it. And a lot of that, you know, is what we spent last summer on, testing different recipes and getting this right. And the reason why we spent time on that and why it's economic development is because now we just have this ready to go, right? Like we are able, if Food Connections or another program that has like, you know, commercial kitchen and the ability to do this, that meets the regulations, contact us and say, hey, we need some work, or we're looking to do maybe a fundraiser. Could we access and use your recipe? We'd be like, yes, this is what we're here for. And so we would hand them, here is like the recipe at the different volumes, because we have all that calculated. We could even, and it would be in their best financial interest for us to do so, just buy all the stuff for them and give it to them. And that's why we created things like this. So people can see on our shop site, there's also 3 different soups that we made. And again, when we worked with the designer, we said to them, we want to be able to change where it says, you can't see it on here, but it says prepared for LITE by, that's the regulation, and then it says Food Connections.
Right.
But we got the designer to give us files so that we can go in and change this. So it was, again, like that, it's economic development because we put in some money getting this ready, but now it's ready. Now it's an asset. And this is an asset that we're going to be talking to our community, our larger community, with about how they can use this asset, because we're in it for them, right? That's the other thing I mean by being a partner organization. It's like, you want to fundraise, or you want to create some jobs and also be able to try to pay for, you know, maybe some things that aren't paid for. This might be an option. And
For
so we have a
sure.
whole bunch of ways of working. And the economic development piece, again, we don't really emphasize it too much, but I actually think this last year we did probably more economic development, as in things that might have that could have a future, than we've probably ever done.
And I think that shows, and that demonstrates sort of how complex this topic is, rather than complicated. I think there's a difference between those two. And the complexity here is that somebody had to come up with the recipe. There was the packaging design, and then making sure that it passed standards, because you don't just get the nutritional label for free. You know, it has to get tested, and there are standards there for a reason, for food safety stuff. Somebody has to have the facilities to produce it. And then you've got the labor time, which is the jobs to do the production. So there are a lot of facets of this. And then during the pancake breakfast season, because instead of doing the 1-day event like we normally do, the last Friday of November each year for many, many years, this year and last year were both interrupted on that. And this year, rather than just doing the event multiple weeks in a row, when people would order these packages, we had them delivered. And that was another job that it created. So there's a lot of opportunity to do that at multiple different levels, all the way through the supply chain. And you're used to hearing words like supply chain and product development, research and development, standards, and all of that kind of stuff. That's all very business language. And I don't think that's something that nonprofits have access to outside of things like economic development as a task. So it certainly has been very interesting this year, doing more of that stuff, with not just with the pancakes and the soups, but we've also done more work with the Cutting Edge this year, and other partners as well. So it's certainly been a very diverse group of people that we've worked with for a lot of different products.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And again, it's something that as an organization, I think we're going to have to figure out how to talk about economic development in a way that maybe people, you know, their eyes don't glaze over. Because I think it's one of those words that is like a little bit like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And the pancake mix is like a really, you know, it feels like like you can touch it, right? You can see what
Mm.
it is. But you know, even one of the things that we did earlier in the year is we gave a $5,000 grant to the cutting edge for development purposes. And so it wasn't meant to be a grant to supply some wage money or some wage subsidy kind of money. It was really like, this is for you to be able to do some product development. And that is very hard and rare for organizations to tap into. So we were really like thrilled to be able to do it. And again, that money is money that comes from our generous donors. Like it's like almost impossible to find money to do that kind of thing within our sector, even as there has been a boom of and lots of talk about social enterprises. So it's this really kind of interesting, like tension in a way where it's like everyone's like social enterprise, but it's like, you know, unless you're going for like super big financing, sometimes the availability of just finding development money. There's some money out there that's, you know, about feasibility studies, but sometimes you just need like to do the thing. And all of the recipes and a lot of the things that we did with the cutting edge or they did on their own was really like prototyping. It wasn't feasibility. It was the you know, the first putting it out in the world kind of thing. So
Right.
my hope and what our challenge will be, and a good challenge will be coming in the new year, will be how do we make sure that like we can find a way and find the right partners and find the right customers to do more soups, because you know, now we have those assets. It's our responsibility now to ensure those assets get used for the purpose that they were intended, which was to create training and job opportunities, right? Like, which I'm really excited about, because I think the development piece was like the hard part and the expensive part, and then kind of learning how to do it. Learning the sales piece will be a little bit of the next piece.
Absolutely.
I'm excited. I'm actually really excited about that piece as well, which is why, like, when I put that list together, here's where the money would go, and the board had a say in that as well. It was like, you really need to say to donors, we really want some funds that are going to be really directed for this purpose. Because the other thing, and maybe I don't know if we should make this the last word, but like the other thing about economic development is the potential impact is just vastly of a different order. So for example, if we can work with a group like, say, the Cutting Edge, and they can have an ongoing active production line, that means they can keep people employed, right? So it's no longer an
Yes.
8-week kind of job experience, that it could be a longer term employment possibility. Which when you consider like some of the women that they're working with, women who are new to Canada, adjusting, doing language work, you know, if they're only there for 6 to 8 months, even, is that long enough for most people to be able to really do the work of settling in a new country, you know, figuring out like a whole new community, and of course the language issue. So there's a real like longer term impact that actually investing in economic development makes a lot of sense. Where I think LITE has struggled has been to really make that case that like we need some pretty big investment into economic development in order to create like longer ongoing jobs. And so, but I think like there's an ROI, you know, in that
Mm.
kind of activity.
There absolutely is, and we'll be seeing it as we come into our year end and we start getting some of those numbers together and understanding what the outcomes have been for this year. I think we'll definitely see more of it.
Yeah, awesome.
I do think that's a good place to a good thought to leave on is we have
Yeah.
the opportunity to do more than we've ever done. And a lot of it will come out of economic development, but we definitely need that seed money. And a lot of that will come from, we hope, the fine people watching this this little chat who can support us at lite.mb.ca/donate any day of the week or the year that they so choose.
Thank you so much. If you are one of LITE's donors, we really, I can't even emphasize it enough. We can't do the work without you. This is a lot of what LITE does is not funded by government. And so if we want to do charity differently and we want to give people opportunity, we have a whole bunch of ways. And I think we talked about them in this conversation. It's really nice to get into some of the detail there. We have a whole bunch of ways to let people get on a path that is good for them and good for their community. So if you can support LITE this year, we would say just thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks for spending some time with us. I'm glad to have an opportunity to do something a little bit different.
Nice
And yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.